Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I did a video last night and I was really shocked at the number of people who actually came in and told me that I didn't know the science and they had evidence, and science says dairy and milk are bad for you. And it's really actually downright scary to me, the level of scientific ignorance that we're seeing here, because it's really shocking to me because I have looked into this in detail, in great detail. Keep in mind, people, cancers run in my family, heart disease runs in my family. I'm older. I actually legitimately care about this stuff for purely selfish reasons. In other words, I want to reach all my fitness, strength, athletic goals, but I also don't want to die. I have a personal vested interest in that, and that is where my bias is. And so for me, I look deeply at this dietary stuff, and I look at all the research, because I'm not going in saying, hey, I want to confirm a bias. I'm going in saying, hey, I still want to be alive and healthy in 20 years, right? I want to make it to my 60s. I have a very big bias towards living and finding the truth of the matter based upon all the data, not some sort of fringe, hippie, trendy nonsense, because I don't care about that. I want to see the data. And so people need to understand, when we say meta-analysis, a bunch of people came in and like, well, I found this study. Your individual study, if you're in a debate, a scientific debate, and you produce 3 studies against a meta-analysis, and the meta-analysis says the opposite of what your studies say, you automatically lose that debate. So just for those who aren't aware of how this works, you can only trump a meta-analysis with a newer meta-analysis. You don't use individual studies, because a meta-analysis' job is to take all the available studies on a topic and break them down and compare notes. And then they have machines that calculate, and computer programs that calculate various statistics based upon what you plug in, and that goes into your meta-analysis. And actually, we have better abilities to do meta-analysis today than we did 20 years ago. So a lot of older data has been re-looked at with newer studies and newer calculations, and a lot of it has been re-examined, because that's kind of how science works. And so meta-analysis usually represent the closest thing you have to a scientific consensus, because obviously if you do 20 studies on a given thing, you're going to get some variation. In fact, if you did 20 studies on arsenic, you're probably going to find one in those 20 is going to say arsenic isn't poisonous, right? And, you know, if you did 20 studies on broccoli, you would probably get one study with some static in the data that suggests that broccoli might be dangerous to you. So you have to do multiple studies and meta-analysis to get to the truth. And I pulled 2 different meta-analyses for you guys that are within 2 years old, because that's what we really need. We need the modern stuff. And this first one looked at several things with dairy. It wanted to assess on the total scientific evidence of looking at various observational studies and randomized controlled trials to see the risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, cancer, and all-cause mortality, to look for statistical evidence of these things. Because if something indeed causes cancer, you're going to see it in the population. In other words, if something causes colon cancer that you put into your body, you're going to see it. If you go look at several countries and you take people and you find out who consumed it and who didn't, the people who consumed it are going to get cancer at a statistically higher rate, right? And if it doesn't cause cancer, then you're not going to see it at a statistically higher rate. And that's not a guarantee of causation, but they're looking for correlation. Is there any overlap? And, you know, perfect example, if someone who doesn't consume or put a product into their body ever gets the disease it's supposed to cause, and then you find people on the opposite end, then you need to be able to look closer. You need to figure out what's going on, because obviously there's multiple variables involved at that point. But they looked at all of this, and so let's kind of look at what they found. And since I put these studies in the actual video, you guys should be able to find them on your own based upon this if you want to read the full detail. I don't link studies in my descriptions anymore. I've gotten in trouble with YouTube for that in the past. But you have everything you need here to find these studies on your own now. If you actually care, you'll look for them. So what'd they find? Well, they found some interesting stuff in this meta-analysis. They concluded that the total of available scientific evidence supports that intake of milk and dairy products contributes to meet nutrient recommendations and may be protective against most prevalent chronic diseases, whereas very few adverse effects have been reported. In other words, they were negatively associated and oftentimes reduced risk for type 2 diabetes. In other words, dairy intake was shown to be correlated with lower diabetes rates, or type 2 diabetes, which is lifestyle induced, and a reduced risk for cardiovascular disease, particularly strokes. In adults, intake of dairy products was shown to improve body composition and facilitate weight loss during energy restriction. Furthermore, the evidence suggests the beneficial effects of milk and dairy on bone mineral density, but no association with risk of bone fracture. Now, that's what a lot of vegans claim the opposite of, and people who are anti-milk, well, their data is not finding that in the newest data. Among cancers, milk and dairy intake was inversely associated. That means intake showed lower rates with colorectal cancer, bladder cancer, gastric cancer, and breast cancer, and not associated with risk of pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, or lung cancer, while the evidence for prostate cancer risk was inconsistent. And we'll cover that one in the next meta-analysis. Finally, consumption of milk and dairy products was not associated with all-cause mortality. You guys see the problem with what people are saying here? Because what they're showing here is that they found that people who consumed more dairy had slightly lower rates of multiple types of cancers, including breast cancer, which is one, again, people scream about, oh, it's going to cause breast cancer. Well, that's not what they found. They found slightly lower risk of breast cancer in dairy intake. Now, another meta-analysis I had looked at and talked about yesterday, they found that it was just specific types of dairy lowered breast cancer, and other types didn't seem to affect it, and that was yogurt. Now, they mentioned prostate cancer. All these others, they found no association with all, positive or negative. And then there's some data that certain types of milk in certain amounts can elevate the risk of prostate cancer. And that's all we have. That's it. That's the only negative we're finding here. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, you know, this is only looking at white people, and white people are the ones who can consume dairy safely, Caucasian people, Europeans. Well, let's go to the next meta-analysis, because it included multiple Asian countries, and it was conducted by Japanese researchers, if you'll notice the names. So we take this meta-analysis, which looked at specifically cancer. That's all it was concerned with, is cancer. And what do we find? And they did this 11 population-based studies, 4 of which were Asian countries, including Japan, China. Then they had Australia there, which again, Australia is a very ethnically diverse country, in addition to US, European countries, things like that. And they used, again, the best data extraction software currently available, and what they were concerned with was finding cancer mortality based upon dairy intake across ethnic and religious lines. In other words, they wanted to get a broader sum of the human population, and that was important for this, and they calculated for all of that. And what did they find? Total dairy product intake was not associated with all cancer mortality risk. And this is when they go across national lines, meaning there was a wide diversity of ethnicity, race, religion, country. So they wanted to, again, pull this from 11 different countries. So we have a pretty big cross-section. And their conclusions, total dairy products intake have no significant impact on increased all-cancer mortality risk, while low total dairy intake even reduced relative risk based on nonlinear models. However, whole milk intake in men contributed to elevated prostate cancer mortality risk significantly. Furthermore, a linear dose-response relationship existed between the increase of whole milk intake and increased prostate cancer mortality risk. So in other words, what they had found, just like some of the other meta-analysis, they've only found one type of cancer associated with dairy intake. One. There's over several dozen types of cancer, and it happened to be prostate cancer, and only with whole milk, and it was dose dependent. And that's what's been noted over and over and over. In other words, someone who only drinks 1 glass of whole milk a day isn't at an elevated risk. And if you don't have a prostate, meaning you're a female, this doesn't apply to you at all. And keep in mind, they found breast cancer intakes were positively affected by dairy, which again, woman's disease. So the thing is here, all we have, the only negative we have in all of this is that whole milk in large quantities increases the risk of prostate cancer, but all the meta-analysis show that dairy is positively associated with reduced cardiovascular events, including particularly strokes. They have the strongest impact on strokes, seems to reduce the risk of certain types of cancers, reduces obesity, helps preserve muscle mass when losing weight, improves bone density. The health benefits of dairy, according to the research, are enormous. And so people who are claiming that dairy is bad for you are being willfully ignorant of the modern research. They're being willfully ignorant. And I'm sorry, there is no current counter argument to this in existence scientifically. There isn't any. So I hope this has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.